I may be the only one. I think it would be more informative to vote after the debate. The debate's informative, but then we, 2 hours from now, we have to go through and try to remember 15 different amendments. But
I appreciate the comment, Senator Paul. We're trying to deal with the issue of quorums and number of senators going back and forth. So in matter of expediency, we will put them all together. Thank you.
in the 1940s, Congress passed a bill giving the CDC power over quarantine. In that bill, they included language that was vague and ambiguous to allow the CDC director to utilize other measures as in his judgment may be necessary. No one would have guessed that these vague words, what they would have been used for, but they've been greatly expanded during this pandemic.
Senator Paul, if you could identify the number of your amendment.
Oh, it's Amendment 1.
Thank you.
In the early days of the pandemic, many so-called experts predicted a tsunami of evictions if the government didn't step in. Some even said there would be 40 million people on the streets. Never mind that these fears began because of government interference in the first place, nationwide lockdowns that caused layoffs across the country. So the CDC decided to do something unprecedented and suspend every residential rental contract in America. Their orders said that this was necessary because evictions threatened to increase the spread of COVID-19 as they forced people to move, often into close quarters in new shared housing settings. The law they cited as authority was written to quarantine people back in the 1940s who might spread certain contagious diseases. The law contains a catch-all phrase, and other measures, that the director can utilize other measures as in his judgment, his or her judgment, may be necessary. The CDC decided to stretch those words to the limit. The Supreme Court rebuked this overreach last summer in a per curiam opinion that stopped enforcement of that order. The court said that the plaintiffs were virtually certain to succeed on the merits of their argument and that the CDC had exceeded its authority. So what happened next? A study this winter by researchers at Princeton showed that even at their highest point after the moratorium ended, evictions were still almost 40% below historical averages. It's good to know that we didn't end up with 40 million new homeless, but was it ever reasonable to think that that was going to happen? Should the government take drastic actions like stretching the law to mean things it never meant before, all to prevent a disaster that was completely theoretical in the first place? Who suffers when the government can freeze rent collection on a whim? It's not just the landlords. If any emergency can mean rent collection stops, who in their right mind is going to take in tenants? Certainly not small landlords who rent to folks with low incomes or poor credit. Those small landlords need a reliable income to pay their own bills. As rental properties become harder to find, prices will start going up everywhere, and then the most vulnerable people, the ones the government is trying to protect, will get priced out of the housing market. My amendment will stop that from happening. It simply strikes the catch-all phrase in the statute to make clear that the CDC's quarantine authority is for public health, not rent control. I ask for your support. And I ask unanimous consent to add Senator Tuberville as a co-sponsor.